Welcome back to Foolproof. This is our summer series here at Renew Church. I hope you guys are enjoying the series. We've had a lot of variety going through this. And I love variety, so the summer series that we do are always fun at Renew because it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And you guys have had a chance to kind of hear some really great speakers on a lot of different topics. We got to hear Eric Jensen, who's the new pastor coming up to Cambridge, our new campus that's going to be starting. So we were really encouraged to get to hear him. The folks out in Milton, shout out to Milton, got to hear retired Pastor Barry Jones speak, who's a great guy. He's been attending in Milton, and everybody loves him out there. And he just did a fantastic job. I haven't heard enough people, people are just raving about how great a job he did. So good on you, Pastor Barry. Thank you very much. We're hearing lots of great wisdom through this. And we learned in the beginning of this series, it's this wisdom that God has built into the universe. It's built in, just like there are laws built into the universe, there is this wisdom that God built into the universe. And if you figure out what it is and you learn what it is and you put it into practice, your life benefits from it. Things just get better. Now, if you ignore it and you don't use it, it's to your own peril. It's to your own loss, right? You're giving up a great opportunity, but it's your choice to do that. The Proverbs aren't promises, we've talked about that, but they are principles. And as principles, we could say that they are general truths. In general, they are true when you look at them over the long haul. Now, follow my logic, and maybe this is the reason why I love Proverbs so much. General truths, another word that you could use for that is generalizations, right? And another word that you could use for a generalization is actually a stereotype, right? It actually is. If you follow the logic, that's really the same thing that we're talking about. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the last thing that you want to do in our new politically correct world is use a stereotype, right? This is not popular right now to use stereotypes. Am I the only one that's noticing this? Don't use stereotypes with people. They just really get upset. There are complex reasons for this. In the West, we've seen the rapid evolution of liberalism over the last, couple hundred years. Now, when I say liberalism, I'm not using capital L liberalism. I'm using small l as in not a political movement, but just a social movement, an evolution that's taken place in the West. If you actually look up in Merriam-Webster dictionary and you look up the word liberalism, here's the first definition that actually comes up. It's a movement in modern Protestantism emphasizing intellectual liberty and the spiritual and ethical content of Christianity. Do you know that's the basic idea of liberalism? That's the primary idea of liberalism. Now, some of you are like, wow, I had no idea that that's, where it comes from. You see, modern liberalism was actually begun by Christianity. I've talked about this book here, Inventing the Individual, The Origins of Western Liberalism, by Larry Seidentop. It's a fantastic book. This is a respected Oxford scholar who just really understands history, and he goes back and basically outlines how it was the rise of Christianity that really brought about liberalism, because it put focus on the individual and the value of the individual, God's value for individual people. And so this liberalism that we're talking about is a social movement. It's all about personal freedom. And Seidentop shows how Christianity brought about the liberation of women, the liberation of slaves, how it gave rise to democracy. Again, all because, as we look at Scripture, God gives value to the individual. They're all worth, the same value in God's eyes because they're created in God's image. And so Christianity changed the world. There was this amazing paradigm shift that took place when the Christian message began to spread throughout Europe and the rest of the world. But today in the West, personal freedom has swung to an extreme. And so what started as this very kind of positive valuing of the individual, balancing it with the needs of the larger groups and communities that we are in, it's really swung to an extreme where everything now is about the individual. It's all about the one. And the entire group often gets left out or is kind of put, further back on the priority list. Well, we place way more value on the individual than on any group or community today, and that's why you're going to take a lot of flack if you decide to use stereotypes in 2017, because everyone wants to identify as an individual. In 2017, the greatest sin that you can commit is not to recognize somebody's individuality, who they are as an individual, and how different they are people. But the cold hard truth in all of this is that we do find our identity in larger groups, and this is where it kind of comes back down to reality. As much as we like to see ourselves as individuals and define ourselves and how we're unique from everyone, we do find our identity in larger groups of people that we associate with. It's just always been that way, and I don't think it's going to change. When you take the time to notice this and actually admit it, that we are part of larger groups and that we share things in common with the people that we associate with, it actually gets a little bit funny. Because it kind of diffuses you and you're like, yeah, it is true. I'm kind of like that. I'm part of that group and I relate to those stereotypes. You know, Canadian comedian Russell Peters has probably become the most famous comedian for dealing with stereotypes. And he will make fun of pretty much any group or any culture. You can see skits on YouTube where he's making fun of, Chinese, Italians, blacks, Indians, and he's Indian background, right? And he'll bust on his own culture more than any. And it's really, really funny because the stereotypes that he's bringing out, everybody goes, yeah, a lot of this is just true. And we don't want to admit it, but there it is. Well, stereotypes don't come from nowhere. Often there is some truth to them. But there's a war on stereotypes in our society today. The war on stereotypes starts early. It starts in our schools. I talked to my youngest son, Joseph, and he comes home and he's telling me about, the war on stereotypes in schools. They're just really big against, knocking all of these stereotypes down. And to the point where they're teaching the kids to police one another. So if anyone says something that's a stereotype, they've taught all the other kids to go, oh, stereotype, stereotype. So if you say something like, boys like playing soccer at recess and girls like playing hopscotch, stereotype, that someone will point and yell at you for this, right? Even though when you actually go out and you look on the playground, probably 90% of the boys are playing soccer, right? And so it's just one of these things. Stereotypes, really, I think we get afraid of them probably a little too much. I think there's a little too strong a reaction to them today in our politically correct world. They really only become a problem when we start using them to judge people and be mean to them, or when we refuse to let people out of them, right? We create a box and say, no, you have to be that way because that's the group that you're a part of. Yeah, that obviously is a problem, right? But I think, we got to be fair. If someone breaks a stereotype that you may be holding for a person or a group of people, and trust me, even for Christians, there are stereotypes that are real, and I get it. I don't like to associate with a lot of that, but I got to be honest, there are stereotypes there. In the places where the stereotypes are not true and you get to meet an individual and you see that it's not true, you got to let them free. You got to let them out of the box, right? Let me give you a couple of examples, all right? Eminem is a great rapper. He's white, right? It just is true, right? It's so props to him. That stereotype, right, that whites can't rap or they have no rhythm, right? It doesn't hold in this case. Here's another one. Johnny Tran is a really good driver, right? He is a fictional character, actually, in the show. But anyway, I'm just saying, if someone breaks the stereotype, let them free, okay? It's not a big deal, right? So here's the point number one that I made. I'm just having a little fun here. Point number one that I really want you to get is that the Proverbs aren't promises or guarantees, but they will often prove to be true. All right? They will often prove to be true. So if you find a case where it just doesn't happen to work out exactly like it's saying in the Proverbs, don't go, oh, hey, that was a promise. No, it wasn't intended to be a promise, but it's a general truth. Okay? Here's the second point. Don't you try to be the exception. Millennials, listen up right now, because I know you love to be the exception, right? Don't try to be the exception when you read the Proverbs. You say, well, that's the general truth, but that doesn't apply to me. I'm telling you, you're going to get in trouble if you do this, right? The Proverbs say, work as hard as the ant works and you will succeed, right? And you say, well, you know what? I think I know a way I can do this without working as hard. Okay, I'm just saying, you want to be the exception, you go ahead and try. You see things like in the Proverbs, it says, don't even go near the adulteress's house. Don't even go near it. Right? But some people will say, well, you know what? I'm not as weak as other people are. Right? I think I can handle this. Right? The Proverbs are generally true. Don't you try to be the exception. I'm giving you some good advice here. All right, now speaking of stereotypes, a lot of people think that a good sermon needs to cover a lot of verses. I've been guilty of this in the past, of like just covering a lot of material. Because you know what? Volume, it's good, right? If you're going out to eat somewhere, you just want volume, right? Well, this is a stereotype. Whether it's a whole passage or a topic that has a lot of verses to it, some people think that you got to cover a lot of territory to have a good sermon. Today I'm going to break that stereotype because I'm not going to teach you a whole chapter. I'm not going to teach you a whole passage. I'm going to teach you one verse today. How's that? All right? You good with this? One verse is all you're getting today. It's a good one. It's a good verse. Just one, and you're going to know it by the time that we're finished. Interestingly enough, it touches on this whole idea of liberalism that we just kind of talked about a little bit, small l. You see, as human rights and freedoms have increased, and as wealth has increased, particularly in the West, Western society has become literally the wealthiest society in the history of the world. That's us. That's where we're at. The truth is that today we experience amazing benefits that people in other generations could only have imagined, if they could have even imagined them. And we have all of this stuff at our disposal. We can do and be and try more things than people could ever do before, and still in parts of the world can't. So we have this amazing privilege that has all of these benefits, but also some very terrifying pitfalls. Terrifying. And there's a verse that really comes to my mind when I think of all of this excess that's killing us. You know, in some parts of the world, people die from not having enough of certain things. But here in the West, we die from having too much of a lot of things. That's what we're dying of. So I'm going to teach you from this one verse that sometimes it's better to lock in one simple thought as opposed to covering like 30 different things and you going away and forgetting them all. Maybe we'll cover one thing today and you'll go away with it, and maybe you'll hold on to it not just for today or for this week or month. Maybe you'll hold on to it for the rest of your life. That's my goal today. All right? One simple thought. If I succeed in this, you'll remember it and you'll use it for the rest of your life. Here it is. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Proverbs 25:16. Isn't that a pretty verse? This is like sweet and sour in this verse. Like the whole gamut is covered right here in this one simple verse. Let's say it together. If you find honey, eat. Let's back up. Hang on. We need the verse if we're going to do it. Okay, here we go. We're not there yet. We're going to get there. We will. Trust me. All right, here we go. Together. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. Proverbs 25:16. All right, now there's lots of different techniques you can use when you're learning a verse. Now, even with the reference, you see here Proverbs 25:16, 2 plus 5 is 7, 1 plus 6 is 7, right? So it's 7 and it's 7, really. Okay, you're going to remember these things as we go through. Proverbs 25:16, where is it found? Proverbs 25:16, okay? So you're going to lock this in, okay? There's lots of tricks that we can use, all right? Let's say it again. If you find honey, back up. No, not yet. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. All right, now, we've got a bunch of different techniques. I've got like 7 different techniques that we're going to use to lock in this verse today. All right? The first one, we're going to recite it 5 times together. All right? Recite the verse 5 times. We're just going to get this going. All right? We won't do the reference every time. We'll do it at the beginning, and then we'll just do the verse. Let's give it a shot, okay? We'll let them see it here. Let's go to the next one. Here we go. All right? Proverbs 25:16. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. Let's do it again. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. One more. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Some of you are like, I'm going to vomit now because you're giving me too much of this verse. All right. Now, think about this verse for a second. It says, if you find honey, right? If you find honey. Now, this is how we find honey, but back in the day when this was written, if you wanted to find honey, right? Cultivation of honey started, a long time ago, but probably when this was written and where this was written, not necessarily. By the sounds of this verse, they were going out in the woods somewhere and finding wild honey. You found it. And when you found it, you would go and, oh, this is really good stuff, right? Because this isn't something that we can produce as humans. The bees make this, and it's amazing stuff. I mean, how many of you have seen videos before where bears are finding wild honey? Have you seen this kind of stuff on YouTube? Like, the bees are everywhere. They're going, and they're stinging that, and the thing is like, he's reacting a little bit. They're stinging him like on his face, on his snout, and he's like shaking it up. But is he going anywhere? Oh, no. No, he's eating the honey because there's nothing that tastes like this. Like, this is amazing. Bear's been eating fish and berries and stuff, and he's like, where has this stuff been all of my life, right? And so he's just digging in. So if you find honey, this is a big thing to find honey. It's not everywhere. Eat just enough, because your tendency is you're going to want to keep going. You're not going to want to stop because it's really good, okay? If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. Proverbs 25:16. All right, second technique. Here we go. This is what I call using some lateral conceptualization. And I need 2 volunteers for this, all right? 2 volunteers, let's go. All right, that's called lateral concept. I don't know if that's true, if it's called lateral conceptualization. I made that up, okay? But the point is, whenever you're trying to memorize something, you need to distract yourself with something, build some concepts, and then you come back and you revisit. So we're going to technique number 3, which is recite the verse 5 more times together, okay? So here's what we're going to do. This time, everyone to my left is going to recite the first half of the verse, and everyone to my right is going to say the second half of the verse as I motion, okay? So are we going to do this together? Here we go. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. One more. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. All right, you guys are doing good. Very impressed. All right, so next phase that we go to here is technique number 4, and that is to learn some random facts about honey. Okay, so here we go, some random facts about honey. On average, a honeybee produces 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey over the course of its life. You hear what we're saying here? 1/12 of a teaspoon. Like, this is organic, too. It is so good. I just ate a bee's entire life work right there. And it was good. Really good. Now, that's quite incredible. 1/12 of a teaspoon. Bees' life work. That's a lot of bees doing a lot of work to produce the honey that we eat. That's a good reason right there to take it easy when it comes to honey, right? If you find honey, eat just enough, because, man, these poor bees, they're working hard to make this stuff, right? Here's another random fact about honey. Did you know that honey never spoils? It never spoils. When sealed in an airtight container, honey is one of the few foods known to have an eternal shelf life. In fact, they have found honey from the tombs of the pharaohs that is perfect, right? However those bees are making this, they're putting something in it, the secret ingredient, it keeps it from spoiling. It's amazing, honey. Here's a third random fact about honey, maybe the best. There's actually a competition held in Ontario, Canada, each year to create the most impressive bee beard. Did you know this? How come no one's ever told me this before? It's in Aylmer. They have a competition every year for the coolest bee beard. Apparently they get the queen bee or something, and they put it here on your chin, and then all the other bees gather, and you make this awesome beard. Sometimes it turns into a bodysuit. And this is in Aylmer. They have this whole festival, like honey and bees and everything. Why hasn't anyone ever told me this? Anyway, that sounds like a great day of entertainment to me. I don't know about you. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Anyway, random facts about honey. Now, we just cleansed your mental palate again, so now we're going to go back. Step number 5, we're going to recite the verse 5 more times together, okay? This time, those on my right are going to start, and those on my left will finish the verse. Ready? This time, we're not going to show it on the screen either, okay? We're going to do it from memory, because we're getting there, all right? Here we go. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. One more. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit. Very good. Next step. Let's go. Technique number 6, tell a funny story. It was Christmas, I'm not sure how many years ago. As I get old, the years just kind of all run together, and I forget these things. But it was when my son Jacob got his Xbox 360. So we're going back quite a few years now, probably 6 or 7, 8 years maybe, when he got his Xbox. And you know, when you're a kid and you get a new Xbox 360, that's what we call honey. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this? You know exactly where I'm going with this. Okay? So he got his Xbox 360 and he's playing this thing, right? And then he's begging. He's like, we're going to me and Papi's house, right, in Quebec for Christmas, and I would really like to bring this thing. And we're kind of like, well, you know, we want you to be socializing with other people and everything. And how much are you going to do that if you're actually playing your Xbox the whole time? He's like, oh, come on, Dad. You know, the cousins are going to be there. We'd like to play. It'd be a lot of fun. And we're like, well, you know, it's Christmas. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so we take the Xbox, right, to Quebec. And all through the vacation, they're playing the Xbox 360. And particularly the game Halo was the one that he was playing. It's kind of a shoot-'em-up game. Amazing graphics at the time. I'm sure there's better stuff now, but it was pretty intense, like very intense. Like you're fighting for survival all of the time, and stuff's coming at you from every angle trying to kill you, and even stuff is coming down out of the sky, right? There's like different, you know, ships, spaceships, or, you know, helicopters, whatever that are coming. So Jake was playing this quite a lot over the vacation, but you know what, hey, it's Christmas, right? So we kind of let it go, and he and his cousins were having a good time, and, you know, every once in a while we'd make them turn it off. But so we finally, at the end of the vacation, we drive home, and we get home that night, and Sarah and I, you know, we just wanted to relax, so I think we actually took a bath, you know. Sorry to, you know, create too many visuals for you, but we're just, you know, chilling. So we're there, and then all of a sudden, Jacob, after he'd been in bed, he comes charging in. Don't worry, we covered up. We were good. But he comes charging in, and he's glazed over. Like, it's Jacob, but it ain't Jacob. His eyes are like saucers. And he's talking about people coming out of helicopters and shooting at him and attacking him. And he's like a zombie right there. It was very entertaining for Sarah and me to sit there and to hear him go on, but a little scary at the same time, because we're thinking, that's the Halo game. We recognized this is the game that he's been playing. He's played it so much, it's now gone into his head, and he's going crazy, right? So anyone that tells you you can't overplay video games, you might want to rethink that one based on our little survey that we did. So just a little story. If you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it, and you will vomit, right? It's a good little lesson. Technique number 7, share some not so funny statistics. You know, in all different areas of life, we can talk about eating too much honey, going too far, going to extremes. And here in North America, boy, there's so many categories I could talk about. Let's talk about food. The number of obese adults in Canada has doubled since 1980, while the number of obese kids has tripled. That's according to a 2016 Senate committee report right here in our country. Since I was a kid, obesity rates in kids has tripled. Too much honey and other sweeteners, apparently. Each year, 48,000 to 66,000 Canadians die from conditions linked to excess weight. This study went on to add 48 to 66,000. You know, food is great, but the Proverbs actually talk about this little word called gluttony. There's actually a proverb that says if you're given to gluttony, put a knife to your throat. It's not saying to kill yourself. It's saying that sometimes you need a severe threat to make you take this seriously. And if you don't have the strength individually to make yourself stop, then sometimes what it takes is a trip to the doctor's office where he tells you, guess what, you just shorten your life by this much. If you don't change your habits right now, right, sometimes you need a drastic warning. That's what the Proverbs are saying. We could talk about sex. You know, sex is a gift from God. Obviously, there are specific guidelines the Bible gives for it. But our culture, our culture's addicted to sex. Sex is the god of our age today. 35% of all internet downloads are related to pornography. 35%. More than a third. 25% of all search engine queries are related to pornography, or about 68 million search queries a day. Here's something you maybe didn't realize. 1/3 of porn viewers are women. Maybe we were conditioned to think, well, that's just a man's thing. Stereotype, right? No, women as well. Search engines get 116,000 queries every day related to child pornography. So guys, what starts as a healthy interest, sex is good, it's from God, it can easily get twisted into a very destructive force. And we see all kinds of things related to this honey that we don't seem to be able to manage. Sex addiction, disease of all different kinds, unwanted pregnancies, the sex trade and sex trafficking has spun out of this. It's out of control, guys. God gave us healthy, natural desires, but we need to do this in the way that God, prescribed. We could talk about possessions. According to the Los Angeles Times, there are 300,000 items in the average American home. 300,000 items. And you wonder why you can't find a flashlight when you want to find one, right? Well, you're looking through 300,000 items. Another stat from National Public Radio says the average size of the American home has nearly tripled in size over the past 50 years. New York Times Magazine says, and still 1 out of every 10 Americans, even though our houses have tripled in size, 1 out of every 10 Americans rents off-site storage, the fastest growing segment of the commercial real estate industry over the past 4 decades. You know where real estate is growing the fastest? in extra storage space for us to store all the stuff we can't fit in our houses that have already tripled in size. We've got issues. Too much honey. According to The Telegraph, a British news outlet, it says, British research found that the average 10-year-old owns 238 toys, but plays with just 12 on a daily basis. There's a whole lot of toys we could probably be giving away. I know some parents that institute the, if you get a new toy, you're giving 2 away rule. It's probably a good rule, right? Well, the Bible says that the more that we get, the more that we want. Many places in the Bible, Old and New Testament, it reinforces this idea. And the Bible even gives severe warnings to people who hoard up possessions while others around them are struggling to live. And these are things we need to take very seriously. If you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. We could talk about pleasure. Our television sets are turned on for more than a third of the day. USA Today says 8 hours and 14 minutes a day that TV's on in our house. Pretty much half of our waking time, it's on. We spend more on pleasure than we ever have, whether we're talking about vacations or gadgets or tech, cars, whatever. We spend more on pleasure than we ever have. And according to the Boston Globe, November 27, 2015, FOMO, fear of missing out, is real and it makes you depressed, a study says. They've done studies on this now, and this whole fear of missing out, fear that we're not going to, participate in something that our friends are doing, this anxiety that it creates in us, it's very real and it's actually making people ill. We're so scared to miss out on some of the pleasure that's going around. Guys, if you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it and you will vomit. You will have negative reactions and results. It will harm you. We could talk about many other things. We could talk about alcohol. We mentioned video games already. We could talk about money, sports, all the activities that we're involved in. We could talk about prescription drugs, right? We could talk about social media. Want to talk about social media? I don't want to talk about social media. But we could. It's all called too much of a good thing. That's the term that we tend to use in English. Too much of a good thing. And we got to be really careful here in North America. The Proverbs talked about it 3,000 years ago. Do you know what it said? It said this, if you find honey, say it out loud, if you find honey, eat just enough, too much of it, and you will vomit. Proverbs 25:16. Guys, sometimes the hardest thing isn't doing something. Sometimes the hardest thing is knowing when to say enough. And that's the wisdom lesson for today.